Oh gosh, it's quite bright here, isn't it? So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm David Marr Roberts, and there's a good reason for me to, I think, to moderate this, or to a degree, which is I know a little bit about media marketing. So for my sins, I worked with Greg and Jane a long time ago at Future and ran the digital side of the business. And then more recently, I was CEO of a machine learning technology business all about playlist building for video and for music. And then after that, I built a digital marketing agency called Dialect that are based in San Francisco and in Bath. And so I've done that over the last few years. In the last year, I've been mostly advising startups in the tech space. So this session is called the Media Multiplier, and actually is very, very pertinent to the conversations we've been having throughout the day in terms of leverage. And one of the key areas that entrepreneurs can have leverage or can use leverage is using media. So actually, it's a really important tool for entrepreneurs. And the thing that we really want to start thinking about and talking about with the two people I will introduce you to in a second is how media agencies are not just a sort of product that you come and buy or a service. They're actually advisors. You've got to think about them as advisors because they can really, really help you understand how you do something, not just what you do. So for this discussion, I'm joined by two very experienced marketeers. They're also both agency owners, so they're entrepreneurs in their own right, which I think makes it even more valuable. So I've got Emma Millington here, who's CEO and co-owner of Modular, also an NED for SS Great Britain Trading Board, and founder of the Utopia Club, and a number of other things, Emma. Emma's worked as a headhunter within the healthcare sector, and also delivering strategic human capital for private healthcare organizations. Today, she runs Modular, as we said, and it's a successful human-centered digital agency based in Bristol. And then next to Emma, we've got Stuart Smith, and he's the owner and managing director of Mostly Media. We were just talking about how they are the sponsor of a massive football team, Bradford-on-Avon youth team, which I saw this the other day. Stuart's been at Mostly Media for 20 years, overseeing the growth of the business from quite a small operation, first in Yeovil, employing about 18 staff and turning over 20 million per annum. He studied at Bath Uni business, and he cut his teeth in media at ITV and TV before being headhunted to come back to Bristol as head of media at BCLO. He then joined Mostly Media, eventually taking over in 2015 and then the outright purchase in 2020. So welcome to you both. So I'm going to start with a few simple questions. In fact, marketing and media, huge subject. So we can't, in 30 minutes, we can't really deal with it. But so we decided to focus on areas that are most likely to be helpful for entrepreneurs. So specific stages. So that we're going to do this. So first stage, which is the early stage, and then we're going to talk about maybe fundraising stage, and if we have time, the exit stage. So we can give you that. Now there's a big bit in between, which is actually, the product. You're laughing, aren't you? There's the big bit in between, which is really important. But because we thought we would focus on some key stages for entrepreneurs, because we just haven't got time to cover everything. So let's say I'm right at the start of my journey as an entrepreneur. I've got a product. I've identified who it's good for. And I have a pretty unknown brand. I need to punch above my weight, that's for sure. What should I be focusing on? Who wants to start? Emma.
We've recently done work for a startup who's very much in that position, based in Spain with a US audience, females at board level, so it's a luxury solo travel business. Not jealous when working them at all.
That sounds amazing.
And I think for us the challenge was that first actually she had to get identified with a very different market, which was the people who were going to aid and facilitate the setup of the business, the running. So this was a very unique challenge in that she had to get kudos with different suppliers, insurers, get all her regulations. That process has actually taken us about 18 months. So for her, brand was really super key. Not just having a brand, but drilling down into it, making sure it looked relevant to the luxury market. from a customer perspective that we were using language that was going to resonate, particularly with a female audience at board level. So I think depending on where you are, the challenges are going to be different. So for her, actually, she had a pre-set up task, get the brand, and then we can look at the marketing once she gets the
So that was
information
the focus,
done.
build the brand.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Excellent. Stuart, have you got?
Yeah, so we work with lots of startups right the way through to exit, and about 2 weeks ago we were working with a psychiatrist that's come up with a product for mental health and is literally at the very start of her journey. So we've sat there, and what we do as media people, we obviously buy media, so we buy digital media and we buy above the line media, but what we do is we basically do the maths, and we basically work out the feasibility of a product. And so if we're being told a product is going to cost X, we basically can work out just through simple equations how much money you would need to spend to actually achieve what you need to achieve. And it's really eye-opening when you sit with somebody who's put their life into these things, they've put their personal savings in, and then you do the numbers. And very, very early you work out where we need to change things to make it work. And then we can work with Emma's team and people like Emma who've created these brands, and then we can set on a media journey. But the first point for us is always the maths and making sure that the numbers add up. So we're probably at the very beginning as disappointing as the accountants. We sit there and we are a tether to make sure that people don't burn their money at the very beginning.
I think that's a really good point. I don't know if it's just because I'm sort of an ops background, have a plan. I'm sort of very much, you've got to think about what's the journey, what are you doing next. So for us, when we're talking about building a brand, it's really going back to basics of, getting the proposition, looking at the imagery, looking at the content, looking at the plan, so that when you're a startup, your energy and your resources are very limited. If you haven't got a huge budget, you've got to do a lot in a short time with a lot of both of those amenities. So you have to be clever, think clever. And I think if you're doing that without a plan, there's a real chance that you go down the rabbit hole of just sort of social media FOMO, wastes a load of time trying to build an audience, but if they're not the right people, or you're not giving them the right message, or you're not actually putting any conversions in, you might build some awareness, but in the early days you need to get some traction. So I think it's also about weighing up what's important to you as an organisation. Do you just want to get your name out there? Do you want to start selling?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what stage you're at with the product and whether you've actually proven that it's something you understand how to acquire customers. So in a lot of the examples you've both given, there's quite a lot of early stage conversation with founders. How do you deal with founders who, as you said, they put everything into something? So they might be quite single-minded, or they might have, they might not be marketeers, but they've got a very clear view about maybe how they want to talk about their product, which doesn't necessarily fit how you think it needs to be done. So how do you work with a founder in that way? Is it direct approach, no you're wrong? Is it more diplomatic? How does that work?
Yeah, so excuse us, I think the word persuasion comes to mind, but I think prior to that it's about building that relationship and trust. And so you're talking to them a lot about their product and their goals and their motivations, passions and vision, and you've got to help realise that. That's why they've come to us as a consultancy. But also it's about having the evidence, having the data, having the examples of what's worked before, what hasn't. But I think when you're in startup mode, you have to give a little bit. So sometimes you have to try something. If it doesn't work, have the plan B, have the other rationale, or maybe try a few things at once. I think social media channels will often come up for contention because of the numbers, and it feels good, you've got loads of followers. But again, if you're not having the right conversations or actually redirecting efforts and showing that maybe moving to a different channel, different content actually gets engagement. So, yeah.
Well, and I guess for you, Stuart, it's on the same idea with talking with founders. Often they don't always know fully who their audience is. They might have a great idea for a product, but they might think they know who the audience is. But have you got any examples of how?
Yeah, so We have lots of founders who think they know their audience, and many of them do, but we just back it up with data. So they'll have an innate understanding, and our very best, so our largest client we've been with for over 20 years, and they were 2 solicitors and a red phone, as he always tells me about his red phone, and they're now the largest sole practice personal injury solicitor in the country. So they have 140 solicitors out of Taunton. And he is a very forthright guy, Grant, who owns it. But what I tend to find with entrepreneurs is they're single-minded, but they will listen. So as long as we come at things with data, with fact, with experience, they absorb. And very often, really successful entrepreneurs innately understand. They innately understand their market, their product, and also what we do, which is really embarrassing because I've taken 20 years to work out what we do. And then I'm sat with a solicitor who can also do my job better than I can. So we're a very data-led industry, but we also come at it with a load of fact and a load of we've been there before, so we understand what happened. So what we find with, and the social media thing's a really good thing, everybody has to do social media. That's TV's dead, social media's this, radio's dead, we've got to do Google, we've got to do this. And our job as media people is there's lots of levers to make things happen. And depending on the stage of the journey, it's our job to navigate those. And what we find is many people are like magpies. So they've read an article, and so this social media must work. And then we'll sit there, and I'm sure you've had this as well, where it's TikTok, and we're targeting 60-year-olds. And we're not going to sell your product or build your brand in this environment. So we just have to bring everything back to a data-based play, and then sprinkle it with a bit of experience. And then our thing is we'll always spend the money as though it's our own. So we would say if this was ours, that's what we would do.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense that once you actually get into the growth engine of you're starting to acquire customers, actually entrepreneurs they're smart. They're going to look at it and look at the numbers and go, actually that's how we're going to acquire customers. So let's move into the stage of I might be fundraising as an entrepreneur. So I might have established something. I might have already proven that it's working. Maybe through my own cash, I'm starting to fundraise. You talked about different platforms and channels and levers. What would you be advising entrepreneurs around that period, if anything different? Is there anything specific? Because obviously their product might be selling through the channels that they have, but is there anything specific they should be thinking about in terms of media when it comes to that fundraising stage?
So the guys that we've worked with that have gone to that next level, when it's a bit like when you're trying to get stocked in a supermarket, all of a sudden you have to put your head above the parapet. So we have a model mostly where when people start off, be it a new brand or a new company, there's a digital harvest and awareness period, because you've got a defined market and you can go and find those people really, really easily or through digital channels, be that social, be that Google. And then what happens is you kind of hit a ceiling. And so all of a sudden you go, oh no, it doesn't work. And actually to scale a business takes, as I said, lots of levers. So when guys are starting to look for investment, they sometimes have to stick their head above the parapet, and which takes a little bit more investment. So all of a sudden you might have to look at versions of TV. You don't have to do lots of TV, and TV isn't as scary anymore with ITV's and Sky's addressable products. You can spend very little, but for investors it looks impressive, and it looks like you're on a bigger journey than maybe you are, and you're looking bigger than you are. So it's about just coming slightly out of the comfort zone, and all of a sudden the figures don't matter as much. It's more about creating a noise and an environment around yourself rather than the nuts and bolts figures, which is where we started with. If you're selling widgets for £1, You know, you need to sell this many widgets for the money that you're spending. When you're starting to look for investment, you need to just slightly be a little bit bolder, and those bottom figures become a little fluffier.
As I say, I think the mindset shifts in our observation when you're hitting to a point of maturity. Early days, you're probably stuck in delivery phase and the strategic piece really takes on. And then when you're looking at your budget and what you're going to do, the appetite, I think, for investment is slightly different in risk. Whereas before, in the early days, those sorts of things you're talking about would be scary and no, and the control. Where I think if you want to accelerate and move on, you have to be more adaptable in your approach and looking at what you do. So when we're looking at platforms, whether it's websites or apps, what will normally happen for those at that stage is either then the brand or the mechanics aren't working, or they're not aligned with the customers, and actually you're starting to address different audiences' needs, like in terms of the people you're getting funding from, rather than just being in your silo.
Yeah.
So you have to expand because you start meaning more to different types of people with different drivers, and I think it's that point of expansion that plans and strategies get very exciting.
And I think as you grow, when you start, you're almost talking to the converted, and so your job is very easy, talking to the converted. As we start pumping more and more people through to your communication onto your website, they're less informed, and so your user journeys will need to change and adapt.
Yeah, and it's such a common story that over time, especially if it's a web platform, very content edit will get bloated and the architecture's gone. So we've done a lot of work either with big charities or big organisations. Sometimes it's about where's the information, is it in the right place? Has that journey broken? And there's just reams of stuff on there that's just not needed anymore. So I think auditing your products is a really healthy thing, but getting into that habit early on.
Yeah. I imagine, especially when you're either going through fundraising process or even potentially an exit, you're going to have people looking at everything you're doing, including all the campaigns. So if there's dead ends and things are not working, then obviously, and that's bad at the best of times, but it's probably some of the things to look out for. Are there any other mistakes or challenges that entrepreneurs should think about when they're fundraising, when they think about their media strategy that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think for me, for all business actually, not just entrepreneurs, is don't believe everything that, and I think Margaret sort of talked about this, it's a sales pitch. So all these massive companies, so Google's and Meta, as soon as they've got you in, it's like heroin. They'll just keep spending your money, and they'll make it very easy for you to spend your money. And there's a lovely dashboard, and there's a lovely thing that makes it all look great until it isn't. So our advice is always, don't believe any of it. Come at everything with cynicism, except for the advice we give, because that's great. So come at everything with cynicism, because all these people want you to spend their money, and that's it. They just want your money, and they will tell you it's great. So we try and advise our clients not to be magpies, and there's a whole thing of TV's dead and blah blah blah. None of it's true. It's just whoever's got the best PR machine. So our advice to everybody is just steady and just let the data inform it all the way through.
You know what works with the data, basically. Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about the next stage, and then I'll go and take some questions from the audience if you can prepare any. But so the sort of final stage for the entrepreneur to a degree, potentially on exit, is there anything different? So I've got my media strategy running, my product is selling, I've got PR running, etc. Is there anything you would advise entrepreneurs to think about if they're in the process of thinking about exiting, or they're in the process of exiting, things they might have to be careful about? Or is it just steady as she goes, just make sure nothing's broken?
Make sure your numbers work.
Yeah.
It's about the numbers, and that's whether you're building a brand, and most or a lot of entrepreneurial businesses now are D2Z, they're selling online, and so those numbers are just an equation. And so make sure the numbers work, because that's all the investors care about. And then, are those numbers scalable? And so have in mind a plan for how you would scale. So what are the steps to scaling? You don't have to have done the scale, but you just need to show how that would work.
Yeah. What about from a branding point of view, or from?
I think there are two things.
Yeah.
One is don't take your foot off the gas and stop your marketing budget because you think that's going to be a good thing in the run up to sale. This is about continuity. It's more about shoring up your brand, your UX, your customer experience. And depending on the type of business, if you have that ability to look at your accounts, who are your top performers, get to know those customers better, what are their problems, and hone in so you start to be more specialised. But then it's that thing of thinking about what are the investors going to want, what's key to them in terms of your services, what's got more strength, more surety. But tying in your view about the data, if you've got the plan and you can show the results and the return, it's about that projection forward. Can you keep that consistency? And we talk about being ruthlessly consistent in your brand, your comms. Bigger companies may have multiple marketing teams all doing different things. It's a much bigger job. If you're an SME, hopefully it's much neater. And then the second thing, we don't invest in one part of a remedy plan like just the website, because you can get a really gorgeous site and its brand's going to be spot on, but if you're not connecting it to your CRM or your leads or inquiries, you're not actually collating any data from that. It's just really nice to look at, and the functionality, you could have spent lots of money on that, but in terms of the value, because that's what we're trying to do, we're trying to add value for sale, that you're not getting all the layers in the cake.
Yeah. And if we're sending people there and your CRM doesn't work, and you're wasting money.
We're still taking inquiries on paper.
Yeah.
Cool. I wonder if anybody's got any questions. Yes, we've got one. I don't know. Oh, there's a mic coming down. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Brooke. I'm from Set Square Bristol. We work with about 120 entrepreneurs a year, and a lot of them are now utilising AI as part of their marketing. I was just wondering if you could comment on the impact it's having on your sector, and also if there was anything that you would or wouldn't recommend to entrepreneurs looking to use AI.
Good question.
You go first.
I've got quite controversial views sometimes on AI and content. I think there are great tools out there, and if you don't have a budget, you're an entrepreneur, you're going to use what's available. But I think there's also a tension between then using tools, generating stuff which is going to feel like AI. If you're talking about brand, unless you've really fine-tuned the tools, if you're talking about brand, that uniqueness, authenticity, and getting to know your customers, it just won't work. You can tell. If you ever see immersive on a post, AI's probably written it. It's one of its favourite words, no matter your sector. So I think it's about balance. We all do things to get ahead and get some presence and be the pufferfish. But again, probably goes back to the data. Is it working? Are people engaging? Does it look right? Is it telling your story? And if not, just change track.
Are there any benefits though on the media side, Stuart, because of the amounts of potential?
So going back to the work in the AI and work, it's a massive issue in media. So all the TV companies, for instance, are working very, very hard to deliver all their stuff via AI programmatically. The reality is that's not best for the advertiser, because in 20 years no one's managed to make a computer slot better than a human and pick the right spots and things. But it is going to be lowest common denominator stuff moving forward. The massive companies, if you let Google will do it all for you. So only one winner in that conversation. But in a scary way, the TV stations are going that way. So with Amazon, Netflix and Disney, and now ITV and Sky are massively investing in the technology behind it, so they don't have to have any staff. So it is going to be. Will that be best for the advertiser and the businesses? I would argue not, but yeah.
I think there's a flip side with AI, though I'm very much on its side, is that when you're building tech, some of the abilities that AI has done and the tech for good that's coming out of that is pretty darn awesome. So I think when we talk about AI, it's not one thing, it's many different things. Machine learning for me is how we talk about content generation, probably with a lot of the data tools we're doing for people. So even in my brain, they're not the same.
No. Let's see if I can take one more question over there.
I've been looking a bit at GPT Sora. I don't know if you guys have been looking at that, but looking at some of the videos that are coming out of AI is just mind-blowing. Do you have any thoughts about how that might impact the world of marketing, with video being a little bit inaccessible to certain small, medium businesses at the moment? Question for both of you, I guess.
I think it's going to be huge, actually. So I think that the content, and you are right, some of the content you see is absolutely staggering. And I think it will give an easy access to a bit like iPhones stealing the thunder from professional photographers. A professional photographer will still tell you, and probably quite rightly, that the product is nowhere near as good, but to the layman, you know, which I am, I can't tell any difference. Similarly, with video content, that will be very similar, I think.
I think, just to add on to that though, the area to observe is regulation, and on a lot of the feeds that gets talked about slightly less, but I think that is going to change how we view. So we might be making things with AI, but we might have to say we've done so, and then we'll just get used to that in a different way. And especially we observe in luxury markets, there's already a trend for more authentic, handcrafted content and services where digital is not part of. So I think it probably came up earlier, we're going to get a huge separation between those that have and those that don't, and what becomes cool. My prediction is there'll be a big analogue renaissance resurgence where everything will be handcrafted and keep your vinyl, kids. So it'll be a balance. There'll be some companies doing something this way, other companies will be more blended, more curated. Hopefully.
Yeah, and I don't think AI is going to be able to replace a brilliant copywriter. You know, copywriting is an art. It's not scraping words off a. Yeah, I fell out with ChatGPT the other day. We broke up, and it was very disappointing.
It went badly, did it? So I mean, there's actually a session straight after this one on generative AI that's preparing right here. So I thought they could probably continue that conversation. But I guess in terms of media and trends and emerging trends like that, is there anything else, sort of as the wrap-up question, is there anything else that people should be aware of that's either happening or coming down the line that you think is important for entrepreneurs to be aware of?
I personally see, we talk about digital and offline, or online and offline. I personally see the whole thing melting in the middle. So, and I think the video conversation is absolutely key, because people respond to video over still, and TV's becoming online video, and there's this massive melting pot in the middle, and I think that's where the whole world is going to collide, in that space where we'll be watching lots of video, and some of it will be from ITV, some of it will be from YouTube, some of it will be from Meta, but essentially what the consumer is going to be doing is going to be consuming video given to you by somebody, and I think that's going to become more and more prevalent.
Yeah, and I think to box clever when you talk about different types of media, because the other thing to bear in mind, if they start banning phones in schools for kids, media usage is going to change and the stats are going to drop horrendously. And even already I've seen an uptake in print. I get a lot more brochures for things through my door than I used to, because people know that just sending a newsletter when you're busy with a sale offer isn't enough to hit it. They need to catch you going through the door. So I think if we're forecasting as an entrepreneur, it's about what are all the tools at your disposal.
It's the
being
levers.
Selective, yes. Yeah, knowing your customers, like anyone who works within marketing, it's about your audience, about your customers. Get to know them, talk to them, what do they want? Because that's the only way you're going to know what their trends are for your particular sector. What's happening in hospitality may not be relevant to service-led. So it's balance and keep focus.
Yeah, and that knowing your customer is obviously, it's an obvious thing to say in media, but it is key. And actually, when we talked about the different stages, we talked about the impact of maybe when you're starting, when you're raising, when you're exiting. Well, actually, a lot of that is around knowing the customer. So you might still have your customer buying the product, but you might want to think, actually, these corporates might come and buy me. Some of those decision makers are the people I'm trying to target. So how do I get them, through my media plan? And it might be as simple, it might be some more PR or something like that. So I think we're just about running out of time according to this clock that's right in front of me. So Emma, Stuart, thank you very much, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you.